This is the school food waste and composting training. Let's dive in with Corey, the compost worm. A quick overview of waste audits. This is a method to determine how much waste your school is producing of different materials. It's helpful both for your planning of what kind of system you might want to use, where you might want to start. Maybe you want to start with snacks. Maybe you want to do snacks and lunch. It's good to know where you want to start and how much you'd be dealing with. This will help you whether you have an off-site system or an on-site system to know scale of disposal you'll need to have access to. A couple of things you'll need to think about and plan for when doing a waste audit. You'll need to determine what are your buckets. What's your separation? Are you going to be separating out food waste, recyclables, and normal disposable trash that would go to the landfill? You might also want to separate out liquids or other types of materials, so that will be something to decide early. You'll also need to determine scale. Is this something you want to do school-wide? Is it something that you would like to keep more focused because of limitations? Maybe you want to just focus on snacks. Another thing you'll need to decide is timing. When is the best time to do this in terms of the school year and the semester? Also, how much time do you have to do this on multiple days? It is helpful to have the audit run multiple times for repetition and for reliability of the information that you're collecting. It's great if you can do a whole week, but even one day, 2, 3, whatever is possible, but knowing how many you're doing is helpful and necessary when you're determining what you're going to make happen. To decide how to move forward, you need to know who's on your team, what schools, teachers do you need involved, the kitchen staff you need involved, the maintenance team that you need involved, leadership at the school. Likely need many individuals supporting this effort and aware of the process, and depending on your scale and timing, you may need more or less involvement. So it's important to connect with who is available, who is interested, and that might help you determine some of the other factors. Lastly, you'll need to help get excited. If it's a new program, it's an opportunity to introduce the concept, perhaps at a school assembly. If you're keeping it small, maybe you would just keep it focused on those classrooms who are involved and work with those teachers to introduce the concept and the sorting to those students. If you have an existing program, it's a way to re-excite the community about the program and to also rally around that effort. And so many things that need to be determined, but it's a really helpful process to go through, both for getting a program started and also evaluation. It's also a very useful tool when you're bringing numbers to your school board or your leadership about the impact of any program that you do or are implementing. This can help relate to savings to the school provided by a diversion program. You may want to have a sense of how much your school is producing before you even get started to plan off of. You might not have time to do a waste audit at all, or maybe you have to just postpone it and you need something to start with. This Excel sheet available on the Google Drive is going to help you give you a quick number on how much food waste you might expect your school to produce based on how many students you have in the elementary, middle, or high school grades. It's quick, it's easy, it gives you a starting point.
Greetings. Today I'd like to share with you a module that we created, the Northeast Resource Recovery Association, created in 2018, entitled Where Does It Organics Go? The premise behind it was to speak with mid-sized generators. So a school is considered a mid-sized generator, and to help all mid-sized generators figure out how they can collect, sort, and either compost on site or what is needed and required to compost off of site to transport their organics off site. So this module was created for Vermont only because the state of Vermont at the time that we were developing it had put into Act 148, the Universal Recycling Law. So we were addressing the needs of the mid-size generators in Vermont particularly. And I just wanted to share with you the Universal Recycling Law, and just so you could see that they were ramping up the timeline. So this was something that was decided back in 2014, and by 2020, any person who generates any amount of food residuals now is not allowed to dispose of them in the landfill. So they have a food landfill ban, an organic waste landfill ban. We have the Vermont Food Recovery Hierarchy. It mimics the EPA one, and the most preferred, of course, is at the heavy top part of the hierarchy, and it's source reduction. Some further research regarding the impacts of food loss and waste and the benefits of waste reduction and diversion. Reducing food loss has significant environmental benefits due to a need for less cropland, water, and fertilizer. It also helps to reduce food insecurity. A statistic I have here from 2016, 1 in 8 U.S. households reportedly experience food insecurity. It also helps to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, agricultural production and processing, post-harvest processing, distribution and retailing are the greatest contributions. And so we can see that by reducing 1,000 tons of food waste, it equals 1,085 megatons of carbon dioxide. Diverting 1,000 tons of food waste from landfill is equal to up to 136 megatons of carbon dioxide. So the bulk of the environmental benefits associated with food waste diversion come from upstream prevention of food waste and loss. And as I mentioned, that's fertilizer use, all the emissions from equipment, soil loss, transportation, and retail consumer. A roadmap to reducing food waste was created by WeFed. They are Rethink for Food Waste, another great resource. They are a nonprofit that promotes a collective reduction of food waste at scale. So meaning they create data-driven guides that are for businesses, governments, funders, and other nonprofits to show how, if everyone joined together at larger scales, how much of an impact it would have on the whole food, reducing food waste. So these are the places that 3 areas: packaging, product, and portions. And for schools, really you're looking at your smaller plates or trayless dining, operational and supply chain efficiency, waste tracking and analytics. That really has nothing to do with schools. It has to do with the manufacturing side of it. Maybe secondary resellers could affect schools. If you're either sending your food waste to those secondary resellers, or maybe even trying to purchase your food from the secondary resellers. And then consumer education campaigns are very important. And that's going to be same within your school, having an education campaign for your composting program. So back to our food hierarchy, that's the source reduction, showing how important source reduction can be. And food for people is the next on the hierarchy. So as a school, you are thinking about maybe doing a share table if you possibly can. Some Department of Healths don't allow that in schools, but if there's a way that you could manage to give you leftover food, food that the kids don't want to eat that they brought from home and don't want to bring it back home, to others that could use that food. That makes a big difference, as well as all of the food shelf. And then food for animals is another one, and I think schools can have a big impact with this, especially schools in New Hampshire, since we don't have a lot of composting facilities in New Hampshire. So if we have farms, if we have piggers or people that have chickens, that's another good outlet. And just to remember that, you know, farms can redistribute imperfect or blemished foodstuff directly to animal food. Restaurants and grocers can as well without treatment, provided it is a pre-plate vegetative food waste. So as a school, your pre-plate items can go right to the hog and pig operations. Your post-plate, the ones that are the scrapings, you need to be able to manage those a bit better. They can only be directed to the animals after it is heat treated and dehydrated. Just a story of a hog farmer in Bethel, Maine. He actually successfully implemented this arrangement with restaurants in a tourist area. He's in a tourist area of Maine, and was able to set up a system for heat treating and dehydrating before he fed it to his pigs. The law allows the feeding of processed dairy products to swine, including pasteurized and unpasteurized whey. It is also acceptable to provide bread products from a bread manufacturer's outlet and eggs from an analogous source. Considerations for separating your food waste. So you know how much you have. Figure out whether you want to take the extra energy or have to take the extra energy. In the case of Vermont and a few other states, you don't have a choice. When you're separating it, where will you put your organic containers? What will be needed to train the staff to this new procedure? What is your generation rate? Just figure that one out. And then you can take that down to each station. And then how often will the container or cart be moved to the disposal site? Where will the material be stored as you're waiting for collection? And if loading into a roll-off, how will material be transferred from the container? Food waste is heavy because, as you can see, we have our on-site food waste storage. So you figured out your generation, your inside containers, what your outside containers are going to be, how you're going to store this, what you can lift, how much space you have on site, as well as inside. You have your container sizing, and so now, because you've decided to take on organics, you do have a third container to add. So again, this is what you would see at a grocery store, a cardboard compactor. You know, your school probably has a separate dumpster for just cardboard. Then you're going to have your recycling container. You're going to have your organics container in addition to that, and you still have your waste roll-off. All of this is going to be showing up on your bill because you will have a tipping fee in addition, right? You already have a tipping fee for your other two materials, 3 materials possibly, and then the organics container could be that fourth. How do you know the size of your containers? And we have to take our generation, right? We know the weight, but then we need to figure out, well, what do we need back there for containers outside? What do we need for inside at the different stations? Basics, you figured out your 1 ton per week. Density, as I said, food waste is heavy and wet. So 350 pounds is 55 gallons. And so if you have 1,200 pounds, you're looking at 1 cubic yard. And so with knowing that you're 1 ton a week, you now have 1.7 cubic yards per week, almost 2 cubic yards you're going to need for just your storage container outside to collect all your food waste. This same math can be done inside, but you may find yourself just getting more creative with knowing that, okay, this looks like a good place to put a 33-gallon container. My staff can only lift one this heavy. Maybe I'm going to put a bunch of 5-gallon containers around, and they're just going to be taking more trips to the outside container, knowing that I need a 2 cubic yarder if I'm producing 1 ton per week. in organic waste. And here we are utilizing and moving all those containers. So first we just spoke about, you have the inside activity of how to move your waste, and that could just be simply a cart. Again, you as the school would have to set this up. Bigger picture, then it goes outside, and you have to then figure out, is it outside in totes? And then how do those totes get put into the container that's going to take it off-site? Because again, we're talking about off-site composting here if on-site composting is not an option for you. And so you want to figure out how you're moving those wheel containers. And of course, you're going to be working with your hauler on that as well. You may not have a choice. Find out what the vehicle is and then take it from there on what type of container will work. So that is the primary challenge, is to get it from the outside storage location onto the hauler's vehicle. Then we have to think about the collections costs. You have a waste hauling contract. What percentage of the volume is no longer going into the waste roll-off? Can a smaller waste container be used, or can there be less waste pickups per week? What size container is required for the organics fraction? How many pickups per week is required for the organics fraction? As you know, what space you have available on your property is going to determine what you can realistically put there for containers. And so if you can't put a 2 cubic yarder and have it picked up every week, then you may have to change to a couple of times per week for your organics to pick up. Keene State College, they had a regular 4-yard dumpster, and it got too smelly and drippy, so they transitioned to a compactor. They had the space to put a compactor on site, and they used it for their organics. So you want to consider with your waste hauling contract, how long is the current hauling contract binding? That's a big thing too, because you might be doing all of these calculations and get all excited about putting your program into place, but maybe your current contract isn't ready to be renewed for another 2 or 3 years. So does the contract allow for you to reduce charge if it's reduced volume? Is it in a container? So if it's in the container, it's the tip charge, or is it a simple charge per pickup, which is a pull charge? Is there a container rental charge, and is it based on the size of a container? Can you bid out a new contract? Save money by having less waste in the container? Save money by having a smaller waste container? Save money by reducing the number of waste container pickups. You're diverting, there's still going to be an expense to this, but you're hoping that your diversion of waste is going to either make it equal what you've already been paying, or less than. This alternatives to your food waste disposal, the EPA has a great cost calculator that provides an estimate of your food waste disposal, including the source reduction, donation, composting, and recycling. So it will help you develop an alternative food waste management scenario based on your waste profile, the availability of your diversion methods, and then your preferences. And then it compares the cost estimates for disposal versus an alternative scenario. So transportation costs to the composting site. An additional consideration, as we've already noted, is what is the distance and to your nearest composting facility. We had a recent project where we mapped our mid-scale generators, and we then also mapped the haulers, and this was for Vermont, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. And so I'm sharing with you a New Hampshire map that we made, and we asked the haulers what their coverage is presently for organic waste and then potential coverage. Most of the haulers seem to be quite content with a 20-25 mile radius. So just to show you more of the maps, and we're actually going to take these maps, that what we're working on now this year under a grant is to create an interactive map. So you can put in the location of your school or business and find out where the nearest composting facility is. For the purposes of this grant, like I said, we were looking at mid-scale generators, and the ones that we chose, this was directed by Antioch to do this. They were working with us on this. They wanted us to do grocers, breweries. We added the farms as well because they are an option for composting. Cideries, wineries, cheesemakers, and ski resorts. As I said, we have them for Vermont, Mass, and we also made tri-state maps so you could see how maybe over the border might be a better use. Maybe there's more options over the border, because as we can see here, the composting facilities for New Hampshire, they're the little dot with the apple in it, and they're just here in the southern area, and the 20-mile to the waste site shows that a little bit more clearly. But there's lots of farms all over the place. And we chose less than 100 acres because it seemed more reasonable with the size farms that we have. So when you finally bring it to a facility, that facility, like I said, must charge a tipping fee. They need that to remain solvent. The question is, what is this food waste composting tipping fee going to be compared to the landfill tipping fee? If you have that choice, this is another thing to consider. Composting or landfilling, of course, we would prefer that it is composting. The tipping fee covers the operational costs. When they're selling the product at these composting facilities, that's their profit. As you can see, tipping with plastic there, that's an expense. Composting is a controlled process, not only to decompose and stabilize the food waste, but also do it in a way that kills pathogens, and this is why we're talking commercial composting here, avoids environmental and nuisance conditions, creates a compost that is safe to handle and use, and allows for revenues to exceed the costs, because you want to be able to have an end product to sell. In regards to tipping fee, again, the quality of the compost end product makes or breaks the economics of the composting facility. The method that that facility has drives the tipping fee. So, insects, rats, gulls are all a nuisance. There are costs to deal with those. That packaging that we saw in the previous slide, that's going to be a nuisance. In the processing, you might get a better price if you, in the beginning, get rid of that packaging, and then what you're providing to your compost facility is all just food waste and no plastic, right? The quality of the food waste being delivered. And here we have our packaged food waste and just a few pictures of how it looks in composting facilities. So these, we have a bunch on the top left there. They're coming in. Those are being dumped in. They go through this little grinder, and then it comes out as compost, but on one end also comes out the waste. And so you end up with, you can see all the plastic that's left behind. Some people will take that, maybe not a pile like that, but some people have been known to take their piles and go through it another time. Otherwise, that becomes a fee for them just to dispose of. Packed food waste significantly adds to the cost of the operations, and thus adds to the tipping fee charged at the facility. Depackaging units are a wonderful item to have at a composting facility, but that's an extra expense as well. So not a lot of composting facilities have invested in those yet, but maybe we can start that movement. So here we have another toolkit for reducing wasted food and packaging. This one helps you pretty much track the daily amount, type of, and reason for your wasted food and packaging. What you would do is you enter into the food and packaging waste prevention, which automatically creates graphs and data summaries to help identify your patterns of waste generation. So it's great for food service establishments to track the daily amount and type and reason for your wasted food and packaging. And here are some lovely resources: backyard composting, food waste composting best management practices, the Master Gardener program. We do not. I thought we did have a Master Composter program in New Hampshire, but we don't. And then the NRRA School Recycling Club. We have a lot of resources as well to help you out. And that is it. So thank you very much. I hope this helps.